Marcus Chen adjusted his dress uniform one last time as the transport shuttle descended toward the gleaming capital city of Zephyria Prime. The human warrior couldn't help but smile as he looked out the viewport at the crystalline spires that reached toward the twin suns. After 3 years of brutal warfare against the Void Swarm, peace had finally been declared, and every species in the Galactic Alliance was celebrating. The invitation had been a surprise. Princess Lirelei of the Zephyrian Royal House had personally requested his presence at the victory celebration. Marcus had fought alongside Zephyrian forces during the final battle at the Crimson Nebula, where his tactical genius and human stubbornness had turned the tide. He'd saved countless lives, including several Zephyrian nobles, but he never expected royal recognition. As the shuttle touched down on the royal landing pad, Marcus was greeted by a delegation of tall, elegant Zephyrians. Their skin shimmered with a subtle blue-silver hue, and their eyes held the wisdom of a species that had lived among the stars for millennia. They wore flowing robes that seemed to catch and reflect light in impossible ways. "Commander Chen," spoke the lead delegate, bowing deeply. "I am Keeper Velian, advisor to Her Royal Highness. The princess eagerly awaits your arrival." Marcus returned the bow, trying to remember the cultural briefings he'd received. Zephyrians valued honor, tradition, and ceremony above all else. Their society was built on ancient customs that had guided them through countless generations. "The honor is mine, Keeper Velian. I'm grateful for the invitation." As they walked through the palace corridors, Marcus marveled at the architecture. Everything seemed to flow like water frozen in time, with curves and spirals that defied human engineering. Gardens floated in mid-air, suspended by some form of gravity manipulation, and holographic art danced along the walls. "Tell me, Commander," Valian said as they walked, "are you familiar with Zephyrian celebration customs?" Marcus shook his head. "I'm afraid not. Human celebrations are usually pretty straightforward. Food, drinks, maybe some dancing." Valian's expression grew thoughtful. "Our customs are more complex. The Festival of Victory is particularly sacred. It celebrates not just military triumph, but the binding of allies and the strengthening of bonds between peoples." They entered a vast hall where hundreds of beings from dozens of species mingled. The air hummed with conversation in a dozen languages, translated in real time by universal communicators. Marcus spotted Altarian bird people with their brilliant plumage, rocky-skinned Gorlins, and the insectoid Thessari clicking their mandibles in animated discussion. At the center of the hall, on a raised dais, stood Princess Lirelei. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He'd seen her before during military briefings, but always on holographic displays or from a distance on the battlefield. Up close, she was breathtaking. Her silver-blue skin seemed to glow with an inner light, and her long, flowing hair moved as if underwater. Her eyes, a deep violet color, held both strength and compassion. She wore ceremonial armor that managed to be both practical and beautiful, with flowing cape that seemed to be made of liquid starlight. When she smiled at him across the crowded room, Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "Commander Chen," she called out, her voice carrying clearly across the hall. "Please join me." Marcus made his way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and thanks from various alien dignitaries. When he reached the dais, Princess Lirelei stepped down to meet him at eye level. "Your Highness," Marcus said, offering another bow. "Please, call me Lirelei. After what you've done for my people, such formality seems unnecessary." Her accent was musical, each word carefully pronounced in accented Standard Galactic. "I only did what any soldier would do." "Modest as well as brave," she laughed, a sound like silver bells. "My people speak of your actions at Crimson Nebula, how you held the line when our shields failed, How you personally carried wounded Zephyrians to safety while under enemy fire. Marcus felt his cheeks warm. My squad helped. It wasn't just me. But it was your plan that broke the swarm's formation. Your human intuition that saw the weakness in their pattern. Her violet eyes studied his face. Tell me, how do humans celebrate victory? Well, Marcus scratched the back of his neck. Usually we gather with friends, share stories, maybe have a few drinks. Nothing as grand as this. Would you be willing to participate in our customs? I would be honored to share our traditions with the warrior who saved so many of my people. Marcus nodded. I'd be honored. What followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Zephyrian celebrations were elaborate affairs involving ritual dances, the sharing of sacred foods, and complex ceremonies that bound participants together in friendship and mutual respect. Princess Liralee guided him through each step, her hand light on his arm as she explained the meaning behind each gesture. They shared a cup of golden liquid that tasted like starlight and honey, fed each other small cakes that dissolved on the tongue like snow, and participated in a dance that involved moving in perfect synchronization with dozens of other participants. This dance represents the harmony between different peoples, Liralee explained as they moved together, their steps matching an ancient rhythm played by musicians with instruments Marcus couldn't identify. Each person represents a different world, a different culture, but together, we create something beautiful. Marcus found himself getting lost in her eyes as they danced. There was something hypnotic about the way she moved, the way her hair caught the light, the way she smiled when he managed to execute a particularly complex turn without stumbling. Hours passed like minutes. They talked about everything and nothing. The war, their homeworlds, their dreams for the future. Marcus found himself opening up in ways he never had before, sharing stories about growing up on Earth, about his decision to join the military, about his fears during the darkest days of the conflict. Liralee listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions and sharing her own experiences of growing up as royalty during wartime, of the pressure to be perfect, of her desire to be more than just a figurehead. I've always wanted to see Earth, she said as they stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The celebration continued behind them, but they'd stepped away for a moment of quiet conversation. Your planet sounds so different from mine. All that water, those diverse ecosystems. Here everything is ordered, planned, beautiful, but predictable. Earth has its own problems, Marcus said. But yeah, it's chaotic in a good way. No two places are exactly alike. The mountains in Nepal are nothing like the beaches in California or the forests in Canada. Perhaps someday I'll see them. I'd like that, Marcus said, and meant it. The celebration reached its climax as the twin suns began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of purple and gold. Keeper Valian appeared at Marcus's side, carrying an ornate ceremonial cup. It is time for the binding ceremony, he announced. Marcus looked at Liralee questioningly. She smiled, but there was something nervous in her expression. It's a traditional way to honor our closest allies, she explained. We share the cup of unity, which symbolizes the bonds between our peoples. Valian handed the cup to Liralee, who took a small sip before offering it to Marcus. The liquid inside was different from what they'd shared earlier, deeper, richer, with a taste that seemed to change on his tongue. To peace between our worlds, Liralee said. To peace, Marcus agreed, taking his own sip. The crowd around them cheered, but Marcus noticed that some of the Zephyrian nobles were exchanging meaningful looks. Keeper Valian's expression was particularly serious. Is everything all right? Marcus asked quietly. Everything is perfect, Liralee said, but her voice had a strange quality to it. Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. Before she could continue, a commotion erupted near the entrance to the hall. A group of Zephyrian military officers rushed in, their faces grim. The leader, a stern-faced woman with the insignia of a general, strode directly toward the dais. "Your Highness," the general said, bowing quickly. "We have urgent news from the outer colonies." The celebration noise died down as everyone sensed the change in atmosphere. Princess Lyra Lay stepped forward, instantly transforming from gracious host to commanding royal. "Speak, General Thorne. Our deep space monitors have detected movement in the void sectors. The swarm, they're not gone. They're regrouping and they're heading for the Zephyrian home system." A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Marcus felt his soldier instincts kick in, his mind already analyzing the tactical implications. "How long do we have?" Lyra Lay asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of the news. 3 days, maybe 4. Our defense fleets are already moving to intercept, but after our losses in the recent campaign..." General Thorne's voice trailed off. Marcus stepped forward. "Your Highness, I should return to my ship immediately. The human fleet can be here within..." "No," Lyra Lee said firmly. "There isn't time for reinforcements to arrive from human space." She turned to face the assembled crowd, her voice carrying clearly across the now silent hall. "My friends, allies, honored guests, we face a new threat, but we do not face it alone. Tonight we celebrated victory, tomorrow we fight for survival. But I have faith that together we will prevail." The crowd began to disperse, various species representatives hurrying to contact their respective fleets and governments. Marcus started to follow them, but Lyra Lay caught his arm. "Marcus, wait! We need to talk, privately." She led him through a side door into a smaller chamber, richly appointed but clearly designed for intimate conversations. Once they were alone, her composed demeanor cracked slightly. "There's something about the ceremony we just participated in," she began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "What is it?" Marcus asked, concerned by her distress. "The cup of unity. It's not just symbolic." She took a deep breath. "According to our ancient laws, when a member of the royal house shares the cup of unity with someone in front of the court during a formal celebration, it creates a binding contract." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of binding contract?" "Marriage," Lyra Lay said quietly. "Marcus, according to Zephyrian law, we're now married." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He sat down heavily in the nearest chair, his mind reeling. "Married. But I don't understand." "I thought it was just ceremonial." "It was supposed to be," Lyra Lay said, beginning to pace. "But Keeper Valian, he brought the formal cup of unity instead of the ceremonial one, the one that creates legal bonds." "Why would he do that?" Lyra Lee's expression darkened. "Politics. With the swarm returning, the noble houses are panicking. A marriage alliance with humanity would ensure continued military support. Some of them probably pressured Valian into making it happen." Marcus ran his hands through his hair, trying to process the situation. "Okay, but surely we can get it annulled or something. Explain that it was a mistake?" "Under normal circumstances, yes. But with the swarm approaching..." She stopped pacing and looked directly at him. "Marcus, there's an old Zephyrian law that comes into effect during times of war. If a member of the royal house is married to a foreign military commander, that commander automatically becomes a general in the Zephyrian forces and gains considerable authority over defense preparations." Understanding dawned on Marcus's face. "They want me to help defend Zephyria, and they've basically trapped us both into a marriage to make it happen." "I'm so sorry," Lyra Lee said, her voice heavy with guilt. "I should have realized what Valian was planning. You didn't ask for any of this." Marcus stood up, his initial shock giving way to determination. "Hey, it's not your fault. And honestly..." He managed a wry smile. "I can think of worse people to accidentally marry." Despite everything, Lyra Lay laughed. "You're remarkably calm about this." Military training, Marcus said. When something unexpected happens, you adapt and overcome. The question is, what do we do now? Well, Lyreley said, we have a few options. We can try to fight the marriage contract through the courts, but that could take months we don't have. We can pretend it never happened and deal with the political fallout later, or we make the best of it and focus on stopping the swarm, Marcus finished. It would mean staying here, at least for now, taking on the role of royal consort and general, helping to coordinate our defenses. Marcus considered this. The logical part of his mind said it was insane. He barely knew this woman, regardless of how much he'd enjoyed their conversation. Marriage was a huge step, even an accidental one. But another part of him, the part that had been stirring all evening as he talked with Lyreley, whispered that maybe this wasn't entirely a disaster. She was intelligent, compassionate, brave, and yes, beautiful. There were worse fates than being accidentally married to someone like her. And beyond his personal feelings, there was the strategic situation. The swarm was returning, and Zephyria was a crucial ally. If his presence here could help save lives and win the war, didn't he have a duty to stay? All right, he said finally. Let's do this. But I want to be clear. I'm staying because it's the right thing to do, not because anyone forced me into it. Lyreley's relief was visible. Thank you. I promise we'll figure out the personal side of this as we go. For now, let's focus on keeping everyone alive. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry. At Lyreley's acknowledgement, General Thorn entered, followed by Keeper Valian. Your Highness, Thorn said, we need to begin defense preparations immediately. The council is assembling. Of course, Lyreley replied. She turned to Marcus. General Chen, are you ready for your first briefing as a Zephyrian military commander? Marcus straightened into his military bearing. Ready, Your Highness. As they walked toward what would certainly be a long night of strategic planning, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his life had changed in just a few hours. He'd come to a party and somehow ended up married to an alien princess and drafted into a desperate defense against humanity's greatest enemy. But as he glanced at Lyreley walking beside him, her expression focused and determined, he realized he didn't regret it. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And maybe, just maybe, this accidental marriage might become something real. The war was far from over, and the greatest challenges lay ahead. But for the first time since the conflict began, Marcus Chen felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The war room buzzed with activity as holographic displays showed the approaching swarm fleet in stark detail. Marcus stared at the tactical readouts, his newly appointed role as general weighing heavily on his shoulders. 3 massive swarm bioships led a formation of hundreds of smaller vessels, all heading directly for Zephyria Prime. The outer defense platforms won't hold them for more than 6 hours, General Thorn reported, her voice grim. After the losses we took at Crimson Nebula, we simply don't have enough ships to mount an effective defense. Princess Lyreley stood beside Marcus, having changed from her ceremonial robes into practical military attire. The transformation was striking. She looked every inch the warrior princess, her violet eyes sharp with focus as she studied the displays. "What about evacuation?" asked Admiral Kresh, a grizzled Zephyrian naval commander. "We could relocate the civilian population to the inner colonies." 30 billion people? Lyreley shook her head. Even if we had enough transport ships, which we don't, there isn't time. No, we make our stand here. Marcus had been quiet, studying the swarm's formation patterns. Something about their approach bothered him, a nagging feeling that he was missing something important. "General Chen," Keeper Valian said formally, "as royal consort, you have full authority to command our forces. What are your orders?" The title still felt strange, but Marcus pushed his personal discomfort aside. People's lives depended on his decisions now. First, I need to understand Zephyrian military capabilities better, he said. Show me everything. Ship types, defensive systems, special weapons, and I want detailed scans of the approaching swarm forces. For the next several hours, Marcus immersed himself in tactical data. Zephyrian technology was different from human systems, more elegant and energy efficient, but also more specialized. Their ships were fast and agile, perfect for hit-and-run tactics, but they lacked the heavy armor and firepower of human vessels. Your people fight like dancers, Marcus observed to Lyrelay during a brief break. Beautiful, precise, but maybe too refined for this kind of war. The swarm taught us that lesson harshly, she replied. Our traditional tactics proved inadequate against their numbers and aggression. But that doesn't mean we abandon them entirely. We just need to adapt them. Marcus pulled up a three-dimensional map of the Zephyria system. Tell me about your planetary defense network. Lyrelay highlighted various installations across the system's planets and moons. Gravity wells can be projected from these points, creating artificial asteroid fields or disrupting enemy formations. Energy barriers can protect key installations for limited periods. And here, she pointed to several points around Zephyria Prime itself. We have our weather control systems. Marcus's eyebrows rose. Weather control? Zephyria Prime has naturally violent storms, General Thorne explained. We've learned to direct and intensify them for defensive purposes. The electromagnetic interference can disrupt enemy sensors and communications. An idea began forming in Marcus's mind. What's the range on these weather systems? Atmospheric only, Lyrelay said. They can't affect ships in space. What if we brought the ships into the atmosphere? The room fell silent. Admiral Kresh was the first to speak. That would be suicide. Our ships aren't designed for atmospheric combat. Neither are theirs, Marcus pointed out. The swarm vessels are bioships, evolved for space combat. In atmosphere, they'd be sluggish and vulnerable. He began manipulating the holographic display, showing his idea. We use your gravity projectors to create a funnel effect, drawing their fleet down toward the planet. Once they're in atmosphere, we hit them with everything we've got. Storms to disrupt their coordination, atmospheric fighters for close combat, and ground-based weapons they can't reach. It's insane, General Thorne said, but there was a thoughtful note in her voice. Insane enough that they won't expect it, Lyrelay added. But Marcus, even if we could pull their fleet into atmosphere, our ground-based forces would be exposed. If they break through, then we evacuate what civilians we can and make sure they pay dearly for every kilometer, Marcus said grimly. But I think there's something else we're missing about this attack. He pulled up the swarm fleet's approach vector again. Look at their formation. 3 bioships leading, but they're maintaining distance from each other. That's not their usual pattern. Admiral Kresh leaned forward. You're right. Usually they cluster for mutual protection. Unless they're not trying to protect each other, Marcus mused. What if this isn't just an attack? What if it's a test? The implications hung heavy in the air. If the swarm was testing Zephyrian defenses, preparing for a larger assault, then this battle was about more than just saving one planet. We need to capture one of those bioships, Marcus decided. Get intelligence on their plans. Impossible, Thorne said flatly. Swarm bioships self-destruct when captured. Not if we don't give them the chance. Marcus's mind was racing now, pieces of a plan coming together. Lyrelay, those weather systems of yours, can they generate electromagnetic pulses? Massive ones, but only for short periods. The energy drain is enormous. How short? Lyrelay consulted with one of her technical advisors. Perhaps 30 seconds of full-intensity pulse. That's enough. Marcus began outlining his plan. We draw them into atmosphere as discussed. But we focus everything on capturing the lead bioship, one massive EMP pulse to disable it, then immediately swarm it with capture teams before it can recover. The other two bioships will tear us apart, Admiral Kresh protested. Not if we're ready for them. Marcus highlighted several points on the map. We'll need to sacrifice some of our fleet to make this work, but we can use their aggression against them. As Marcus explained his strategy in detail, he could see the mixed reactions around the room. Some officers looked horrified at the risks, others intrigued by the audacity. Lorelei listened intently, asking pointed questions about timing and resource allocation. "It could work," she said finally, "but the casualties will be heavy," Marcus acknowledged. "But if we're right about this being a test, then we need to send them a message they won't forget." The next 18 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Ships were repositioned, planetary defenses recalibrated, and ground forces readied for the most desperate battle in Zephyrian history. Marcus found himself working closely with Lorelei, and despite the circumstances, he was impressed by her military acumen. She wasn't just a ceremonial princess. She understood strategy and tactics as well as any officer he'd served with. "You know," she said during one of their brief rest periods, "when I was a child, I dreamed of marrying a great warrior who would help defend our people." Marcus looked up from the tactical displays he'd been studying. "Childhood dreams don't usually involve quite this much immediate mortal peril." "True," she laughed, but there was strain in her voice. "Marcus, if we don't survive this—" "We will," he said firmly. "And when we do, we'll figure out what our marriage actually means. But right now, let's focus on making sure there's still a kingdom for you to rule." The swarm fleet dropped out of hyperspace exactly when the long-range sensors predicted. 3 massive bioships, each the size of a small moon, accompanied by hundreds of smaller vessels that moved with the coordinated precision of a hive mind. "All ships, this is General Chen," Marcus broadcasted on the command frequency. "Remember, we're not trying to win a conventional battle. We're conducting the most elaborate trap in military history. Stick to the plan, and we might just pull this off." The first phase went perfectly. Zephyrian ships engaged the swarm fleet at maximum range, dealing damage but focusing primarily on drawing them toward the planet. The gravity projectors activated in sequence, creating invisible currents that pulled the enemy fleet into a specific approach vector. "They're taking the bait," Admiral Kresh reported. "Swarm fleet is accelerating toward us." "Too eager," Marcus observed. "That confirms it. This is a test. They want to see how quickly they can overwhelm our defenses." The swarm bioships began their descent into Zephyria Prime's atmosphere, their escorts forming protective formations around them. The moment they crossed the atmospheric boundary, the weather control systems activated. The sky erupted into chaos. Massive storms materialized seemingly from nowhere, with lightning that could split mountains and winds that could tear apart unprotected aircraft. The electromagnetic interference was so intense that even shielded communication systems struggled to function. "Target the lead bioship," Marcus ordered. "All atmospheric fighters, attack pattern Delta. Ground batteries, prepare for EMP pulse on my mark." What followed was unlike anything in the history of space warfare. Zephyrian fighters, designed for atmospheric combat, swarmed around the massive bioship like insects around a giant. The creature's natural defenses were formidable, but in the thick atmosphere and chaotic storms, its usual grace was gone. "EMP charging to maximum," reported the weapons coordinator. Marcus watched the tactical display intently, waiting for the perfect moment. The bioship was struggling against both the atmospheric conditions and the relentless fighter attacks, its movements becoming predictable. "Fire!" The electromagnetic pulse lit up the sky like an artificial sun. Every piece of electronic equipment on the planet flickered, and the bioship convulsed as if in pain. For a crucial few seconds, it hung motionless in the air. Zephyrian assault transports, Their crews, protected by specially shielded suits, swarmed the disabled bioship. Cutting tools designed for space salvage operations tore through its bioarmor, and capture teams poured inside. The other two bioships reacted with predictable fury, turning their full attention toward rescuing their disabled companion. This was exactly what Marcus had hoped for. "Now they're angry," he told Lorale as they watched from the command center. "Angry enemies make mistakes." The second phase of the battle was brutal. The remaining bioships threw everything they had at the Zephyrian forces, their escorts streaming down through the atmosphere in waves. But atmospheric combat favored the defenders, and Marcus had positioned his forces perfectly. Ground-based weapons that couldn't be effectively targeted from space tore into the descending swarm vessels. Fighter squadrons used the storms for cover, appearing from nowhere to strike and then vanishing again. Most importantly, the disabled bioship was being thoroughly plundered by the capture teams. "We've got something," came the report from the assault team leader. "Bio-neural cores are intact. We're downloading everything we can." "Work faster," Marcus urged. "The other bioships won't stay distracted forever." He was right. As soon as the remaining swarm commanders realized what was happening, they changed tactics. Instead of trying to rescue their captured vessel, they began a systematic bombardment of Zephyria Prime's surface. "They're targeting civilian areas," General Thorne reported with horror. "Emergency evacuation protocols," Lyrali ordered immediately. "All available transports to population centers." But Marcus was studying the bombardment pattern. "Wait, they're not trying to cause maximum casualties. They're targeting our command and control centers." The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. "They don't care about the bioship. They never did. This whole thing was designed to force us to reveal our defensive capabilities." "Sir," the assault team leader's voice crackled over the comm, "we need to evacuate now. The bioship is beginning some kind of self-destruct sequence. Download complete? 60% and rising, but keep working until the last possible second," Marcus ordered. "That intelligence could save millions of lives." The next few minutes tested everyone's nerves. The assault teams worked frantically to extract data while the bioship's internal systems began shutting down around them. The remaining swarm fleet continued their bombardment, systematically destroying Zephyrian military installations. 80%, the team leader reported. "The organic systems are starting to dissolve." 90%. "We're pulling out now." The assault transports barely cleared the bioship before it imploded, collapsing in on itself until nothing remained but a smoking crater. But they had what they came for. The remaining swarm fleet began withdrawing immediately, their mission apparently complete. They'd tested Zephyrian defenses, forced the revelation of new tactics, and undoubtedly gathered valuable intelligence about human-Zephyrian cooperation. But Marcus and Lyrali had their own intelligence now. "Initial analysis confirms your suspicions," the intelligence officer reported as they gathered in the war room. "This was definitely a reconnaissance mission. The bioship's neural cores contain detailed plans for a massive assault on the entire Galactic Alliance." "How massive?" Lyrali asked. "Fleet strength estimates suggest they have at least 10 times the forces we faced during the main war. And they're not just targeting military assets, they're planning to strike at civilian populations across dozens of worlds simultaneously." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The war everyone thought was over had barely begun. "When?" Marcus asked. "The data is fragmentary, but our analysts estimate 6 months. Maybe less." "That's not enough time to mobilize the entire alliance," General Thorne said. "No," Marcus agreed, "but it might be enough time to prepare a nasty surprise for them." He looked around the room at the assembled Zephyrian officers, then at Lyrali. Despite everything they'd been through, despite the accidental marriage and the desperate battle, he felt a strange sense of rightness about being here. "Your Highness," he said formally, I request permission to send a message to Alliance Command. It's time to stop playing defense and start planning an offensive." Lyrelei smiled, and for the first time since the crisis began, it was a genuinely happy expression. "Permission granted, General Chen. Let's show the swarm what happens when they threaten our home." As the meeting dispersed and the urgent business of interstellar communication began, Marcus realized that somewhere between the accidental marriage and the desperate battle, he'd stopped thinking of himself as a human officer temporarily assigned to Zephyria. This was his home now. These were his people. And Lyrelei was his wife in more than just legal technicalities. The war was far from over, but for the first time, Marcus felt like they had a real chance of winning it. And maybe, just maybe, he'd found something worth fighting for beyond duty and honor. Maybe he'd found love in the most unexpected place of all. The future would bring challenges he couldn't yet imagine, but he would face them alongside the remarkable woman who had become his partner in every sense of the word. Together, they would forge a new kind of alliance, not just between their peoples, but between their hearts. 3 months had passed since the swarm's reconnaissance attack, and the Zephyrian royal palace had been transformed into the nerve center of the largest military operation in galactic history. Marcus stood before a massive holographic display showing fleet positions across 50 star systems, each representing thousands of ships and millions of personnel. The intelligence gathered from the captured bioship had been invaluable. The swarm's plan was even more ambitious than anyone had imagined, a coordinated strike designed to cripple the Galactic Alliance's ability to mount any organized resistance. But knowing their enemy's strategy had allowed Marcus and the Alliance commanders to prepare something unprecedented in return. "Final deployment reports are coming in," Admiral Thorne announced. "All fleet groups are in position." Marcus nodded, his attention focused on the tactical display. Over the past months, he'd worked tirelessly to coordinate what he privately called Operation Humanity, a strategy that combined the best elements of every species' military doctrine into a unified whole. "Status on the human contingent?" he asked. "Admiral Harrison confirms the Third Fleet is ready," came the reply. 200 ships, including the new experimental vessels. Those experimental ships represented humanity's latest innovation in warfare. Hybrid vessels that combined human engineering with Zephyrian elegance, Altarian speed, and Gorlan durability. Each ship was a testament to the cooperation that had grown from the desperate alliance forged in the previous battle. Princess Lyrelei entered the command center, having returned from a diplomatic mission to the outer colonies. She still wore her ceremonial armor, but now it was decorated with honor marks from a dozen different species, a visual representation of the unity she'd helped forge. "The Thessari hives have confirmed their participation," she reported. 200 bioships, along with their full swarm fighter complements. "And the Gorlans? Admiral Rockbreaker sends his regards and a promise to crush the swarm like the parasites they are." Lyrelei smiled. "I believe that's as close to poetry as the Gorlans get." Marcus couldn't help but grin. Over the months, his relationship with Lyrelei had evolved from necessity to genuine partnership. They worked together with an ease that surprised everyone, including themselves. The political marriage had become something real, built on mutual respect, shared challenges, and a growing affection that neither had expected. "Long-range sensors are picking up hyperspace distortions," the sensor operator announced. "Multiple contacts bearing 27 Mark IV. "That's them," Marcus said grimly. "All stations, prepare for Operation Humanity. This is going to be the biggest battle in galactic history, and we only get one chance to do it right." The swarm fleet that emerged from hyperspace was staggering in its scale. Hundreds of bioships, each one massive enough to carry entire armies, accompanied by thousands of smaller vessels that moved with the terrifying precision of a hive mind. The lead ships were different from anything the Alliance had seen before. Larger, more heavily armed, and emanating a malevolent presence that seemed to darken space itself. "Analysis confirms these are their command vessels," the intelligence officer reported. "Bio-neural signatures suggest they're not just ships, but actual living creatures of incredible size." "How many?" Lyrelai asked. "Preliminary count shows over 3,000 vessels of various classes. Estimated crew complement—" The officer paused, double-checking his readings. "Over 50 million hostiles." The numbers were sobering, but Marcus felt a strange calm settle over him. This was what they'd prepared for, what every military exercise and strategic planning session had been building toward. "All fleet commanders, this is General Chen," he broadcast on the Alliance command frequency. "The enemy is exactly where we want them. Remember, we're not trying to match them ship for ship. We're going to outthink them." The first phase of Operation Humanity was deception. Using a combination of holographic projectors and automated decoy ships, the Alliance made their fleet appear much smaller and more conventionally deployed than it actually was. The swarm, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage, approached in their traditional formation. "They're taking the bait," Admiral Harrison reported from the human contingent. "Swarm Advance Guard is moving to engage our main fleet." "Phase 2, Marcus ordered. What happened next had never been attempted on such a scale. Fleet groups that had been hidden throughout the system, behind moons, within asteroid fields, even disguised as space debris, suddenly revealed themselves. But instead of attacking immediately, they began a complex dance that seemed almost choreographed. Human ships provided heavy firepower and served as mobile command platforms. Zephyrian vessels used their superior speed to hit and run, never staying in one place long enough for the swarm to target effectively. Altarian squadrons provided reconnaissance and communication relays, their advanced sensors cutting through the swarm's bio-interference. Gorlan heavy cruisers served as mobile fortresses, their massive armor allowing them to charge directly through enemy formations. The Thessari contribution was perhaps the most spectacular. Their bioships, created through genetic engineering rather than grown like the swarm's vessels, engaged in direct biological warfare. Clouds of engineered viruses and targeted nanoorganisms attacked the swarm's living ships at a cellular level. "It's working," Lyrelai said, her voice filled with amazement as she watched the tactical display. "They can't adapt fast enough to counter all our different tactics simultaneously." But Marcus knew the real test was yet to come. The swarm's initial confusion was giving way to organized resistance, and their massive command vessels were beginning to coordinate a response. "All units prepare for Phase 3, he announced. "Time to show them what humanity really means." This was the heart of Operation Humanity, not just human tactics, but the human concept that had driven their species to the stars. The idea that no matter how dark things got, no matter how overwhelming the odds, humans never gave up. And they'd shared that concept with every species in the Alliance. The battle became a test of wills as much as firepower. Zephyrian captains, who would normally retreat when faced with impossible odds, instead pressed their attacks, inspired by human stubbornness. Gorlan ships that were damaged beyond normal fighting capability continued to ram enemy vessels, their crews singing ancient war songs. Altarian pilots performed impossible maneuvers, pushing their ships beyond safe limits. "Enemy command vessel is changing course," the tactical officer reported. "It's heading directly for our position." Marcus studied the approaching ship on the display. It was massive beyond comprehension, a living creature that had been weaponized and turned into an instrument of war. But as he watched its approach, he realized something crucial. "It's not trying to destroy us," he told Lyrelai. "It's trying to capture the command center. To learn our tactics, No. To capture our commanders. Think about it. They're a hive mind. They can't understand how we're coordinating so many different tactical approaches simultaneously. Lyra Lai's eyes widened with understanding. They think we must have some kind of super command intelligence directing everything. Exactly. And if they can capture our command center, they think they can decapitate our entire strategy. Lyra Lai smiled grimly. They still don't understand us, do they? Marcus activated the emergency command frequency. All fleet commanders, this is General Chen. The enemy is making a play for our command center. When they do, every ship in the Alliance fleet is authorized to act independently. No more coordinated tactics, pure chaos. Sir? Admiral Thorne looked confused. Trust me, Marcus said. The swarm can adapt to patterns, but they can't adapt to complete unpredictability. The massive command creature reached Zephyria Prime's orbital space, its bioweapons charging for what it clearly intended to be a devastating assault. But instead of trying to defend the palace, Marcus ordered a complete evacuation. All personnel to the escape pods, he commanded. Lyra Lai and I will stay to coordinate the final phase. I'm not leaving without you, several officers protested. You're not leaving without us, Lyra Lai corrected. We'll be right behind you. As the command center emptied, Marcus and Lyra Lee worked frantically to upload a special program into the palace's computer systems. It was something they'd prepared for exactly this scenario, a final gift for their enemies. Upload complete, Lyra Lee announced. We need to go. Now. They raced through the palace corridors as the building shook under the impact of the swarm creature's bioweapons. Behind them, the command center erupted in flames as the creature's tendrils punched through the walls. Their escape pod launched just as the creature's main body settled over the palace, its massive form completely enveloping the building. For a moment, Marcus wondered if they'd waited too long. Then, the special program activated. Every computer system in the palace, every data storage device, every communication relay suddenly began broadcasting the same signal on every frequency simultaneously. It was a simple message, repeated in every language known to the Alliance. Humanity endures. Hope survives. We are not afraid. But it wasn't just the words that mattered. It was what the signal carried with it. The program uploaded every piece of tactical data the swarm creature accessed into its bio-neural networks, but not in the way the creature expected. Instead of organized battle plans, it received the personal logs and memories of thousands of Alliance personnel. Stories of human colonists who rebuilt their homes after asteroid impacts. Zephyrian artists who continued creating beauty during the darkest days of war. Altarian traders who risked everything to help refugees. Gorlan miners who sang to keep their spirits up during dangerous deep space excavations. The creature had expected to find cold military intelligence. Instead, it found something that its hive mind couldn't process. Individual will, personal sacrifice, and the stubborn refusal to surrender that defined not just humanity, but every species that had chosen to stand with them. Bio readings from the command creature are fluctuating wildly, reported Admiral Harrison from the human fleet. It's like it's having some kind of breakdown. Marcus and Lyra Lai watched from their escape pod as the massive creature began to convulse. Its bio-neural networks, designed to process coordinated hive-mind thoughts, were being overwhelmed by the flood of individual consciousness it had absorbed. "It's working," Lirali said with amazement. "The creature can't handle processing true individuality." Across the battlefield, the effects rippled through the swarm fleet. Without the coordination of their command vessel, the hive mind began to fragment. Individual bioships started making contradictory decisions, attacking their own allies, or simply floating motionless in space. "All fleet units," Marcus broadcast. "The swarm command structure is compromised. Press the attack now." The final phase of the battle was swift and decisive. The Alliance fleet, no longer constrained by the need for careful coordination, unleashed everything they had. Human ships led devastating charges. Zephyrian vessels danced between enemy formations, striking with surgical precision. Gorlan cruisers smashed through weakened lines, while Altarian fighters picked off fleeing enemies. The Thessari bio ships performed what could only be described as an act of biological communion, their engineered organisms seeking out and converting swarm vessels at a cellular level. Entire squadrons of enemy ships simply stopped fighting and began broadcasting surrender signals. Within hours, the greatest invasion fleet in galactic history had been reduced to scattered remnants fleeing back toward unknown space. The few bioships that escaped carried with them not just military defeat, but something potentially more damaging: the knowledge that their hive mind was vulnerable to the very thing that made their enemies strong. "Final casualty reports are coming in," Admiral Thorne announced as the immediate aftermath was assessed. "Alliance losses are surprisingly light. The swarm lost approximately 80% of their fleet." Marcus felt the tension leave his body for the first time in months. "Any word on swarm survivors?" "Several bioships have requested asylum," the communication officer reported with amazement. "Apparently, exposure to our individuality program has caused some of them to develop independent consciousness." "Grant it," Lyra Lee said immediately. "If they're truly individuals now, they deserve the same protections as any Alliance citizen." Over the following days, as the full scope of their victory became clear, delegations from across the galaxy arrived to offer congratulations and formalize new Alliance agreements. The battle had done more than just defeat the swarm. It had proven that cooperation and diversity were stronger than conformity and overwhelming force. Marcus stood on the palace balcony looking out at the reconstruction efforts. The building had been damaged but not destroyed, much like the Alliance itself. Workers from a dozen species labored side by side, each contributing their unique skills to rebuild something better than what had existed before. "Any regrets?" Lyra Lee asked, joining him at the railing. She'd traded her armor for civilian clothes, though she still wore the honor marks from various Alliance species. "About which part?" Marcus replied. "The accidental marriage, the desperate battles, or ending up as a permanent resident of an alien world?" "Any of it. All of it." Marcus considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, he'd been a simple military officer attending what he thought was just a celebration. Now he was married to alien royalty, held the rank of general in a foreign military, and had just helped coordinate the largest battle in galactic history. "No," he said finally. "No regrets at all." "Good," Lyra Lee said, slipping her hand into his. "Because I've been thinking about our future." "Oh?" "The Galactic Alliance will need a permanent coordination center. Somewhere that all species feel welcome, where different tactics and strategies can be studied and integrated. I was thinking Zephyria Prime might be the perfect location." Marcus smiled. "And naturally, such a center would need experienced commanders to run it." "Naturally. Of course, it would mean staying married to me permanently. I know that wasn't part of the original plan." Marcus turned to face her fully. "Lyra Lee, somewhere between that first dance and watching you coordinate a 20-species battle fleet, I stopped thinking about this as an accident or a political necessity. You're brilliant, brave, beautiful, and apparently crazy enough to marry a human. If you'll have me, I'd like to make this marriage real in every sense." Her smile was radiant. "I was hoping you'd say that." As they watched the reconstruction continue below, Marcus reflected on how much had changed. He'd come to celebrate the end of a war, and instead had helped forge something new. Not just a victory over the swarm, but a new kind of alliance based on cooperation rather than mere necessity. The war was truly over now, but the peace they'd built was something worth protecting. and he couldn't think of anyone he'd rather protect it with than the remarkable woman beside him. "So," Lyrelay said, "ready for your next adventure?" Marcus laughed. "With you? Always." The future stretched before them, full of possibilities they couldn't yet imagine. But whatever challenges came next, they would face them together. Human and Zephyrian, warrior and princess, accidentally married but genuinely in love. In the end, that might be the most human thing of all, finding hope and happiness in the most unexpected places and making the best of whatever life throws your way. And if that meant spending the rest of his days on an alien world with an alien princess who'd become the center of his universe, well, Marcus Chen had certainly faced worse fates. The celebration was finally over, but the real story was just beginning.